Would you go cordless with your sander? This is the new FLEX FX3411, and it's their 24 volt 5-inch random orbital sander. We get 4 different speeds on this, very center of gravity sander. Let's see how this thing does. We've got another new tool from FLEX. This is their 24 volt random orbital sander. It's a 5-inch pad, runs on their 24 volt platform. It's the model number FX3411. We get 4 different speeds in this. We get speed 1, 2, and 3, and we also get a turbo mode. Now that's going to give us from 6,000 all the way up to 13,000 oscillations per minute. Now what does that mean? Well, oscillations per minute means that it's going to oscillate or orbit that 6,000 to 13,000 times depending on which speed you're in. Now that does not mean rotate. The rotations are random on this. That's when it says random orbit sander. The orbit is forced, and the rotation just comes as a component of the orbit. And I'm going to touch more on that in just a moment. I'll give you a tip on sanding. Doesn't matter if you're sanding wood, if you're sanding Bondo off a car, or if you're finish sanding for a polish on a car. And it even goes for polishers as well. So we'll talk about that here in a moment. As we mentioned, we get a 5-inch pad. We get a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 holes for dust extraction. So whether we're using our included little dust bag here, or we're hooking up a dust extractor or vacuum up to it, that's where it's going to pull that through, is through that pad. Well, first through the paper, so you need to be using some sort of paper that it can breathe through, like a woven paper, or something like this that already has the holes in it. Make sure you line your holes up when you install it. Now, this is a true 5-inch pad, as you can see there, which also known as 125 millimeter in the metric world. Now here on the dust port, the external dimensions of this dust port is like 1.4 inches. However, the internal is a 1 inch or 1.25 inch internal measurement. So a lot of your smaller dust extractors will fit inside there for that 1.25 inch on the inside. So again, 1.4 on the outside and 1.25 on the inside. The little dust bag here has a like a locking mechanism. You see a little unlock here and a lock here. You see an arrow here on the bag. Just line this up and then little 1/8 turn, 1/4 turn, whatever that is, and that's going to lock that bag into place. Take it off the reverse of that, and then you can go empty your bag, and it has somewhat of a filter on the bag so it can breathe but yet still catch all of your particulate. And we'll test that out here in a moment and see how well it does. Now obviously if it runs on their 24 volt platform, then we need to run a battery on this, and this is one thing that I think is going to be a key in the selection of using this tool. Regardless of how well it performs, it could probably kind of get out of hand if you had too big of a battery hanging off of there. So let's go over that, and I will give you my recommendation on where I think it should be. I believe they're saying something like a 30-minute runtime, which I'm assuming was probably with a 5 amp hour battery, and we will test some of that here in a moment. But with that 5 amp hour battery, that'd go fine on there, and it's not tipping over. I guess if you push it over, it'll stay there. But otherwise, it's still sitting flat, so it's not like you're fighting against it with that 5 amp hour on there. However, I just think that that's just a bit too bulky for this tool. Now, what really works nice on here is the little 2.5 amp hour battery. Still get a lot of runtime out of that. By the way, love the fuel gauge on the FLEX batteries. Easily see that on either side. Anyway, that will work great on there. It's light, it's not too big, and it's free and clear of you, and you can easily maneuver that sander with that 2.5 amp hour on there. However, you're sacrificing what, half the runtime of a 5 amp hour? So maybe there's an in-between, and there is, obviously, or I wouldn't have said so, and that's the 3.5 amp hour stacked lithium. And I'll show you, same footprint as far as width. It's just maybe a touch wider, but it doesn't have these little stick outs there. So in a sense, it's actually a little narrower or more narrow. And as far as height goes, it is a bit taller. So maybe a 1/4 inch, 3/8 of an inch taller. But you're going to get another amp hour of runtime. So 3.5 amp hours of runtime versus the 2.5. So a little smaller than the 5. However, it's quite a bit smaller than the 5. So now that work, I think that's the perfect match for this tool, is that 3.5 amp hour stacked lithium battery. Now we have a really nice grip right there on the top of the tool, which, by the way, that's another nice thing of where this battery is placed. I can set it there on the pad, or I could set it up like this on the battery, and that's going to sit quite nicely as long as we don't have the dust bag or an extractor on there. And you see the very aggressive pad on the top so that you can actually grip that and hold that right there in the palm of your hand so that you can guide that sander, as well as, you know, provide the power or the pressure where you want to, even though you shouldn't apply too much pressure. And again, we'll go over that here in a moment. Right here on the front of the tool, where also your index finger is going to be. So typically you're going to be holding it like this or something like this. And so if you want to turn that power on, you can easily reach that power button right there on the front of the tool, press it in, and turn it off when you need to. And then we can also access our buttons here, so we can go speed 1, speed 2, or speed 3. And then if we want turbo, we can press the turbo mode. And by the way, even if we're just on speed 1 and we want to go to turbo, we can just push the turbo, and that's going to provide all the power to the tool. So just for a quick size of the tool, looks like from front to back, right at 6 inches with the 2.5 amp hour battery. Right at 4 inches tall, maybe just a touch taller than 4 inches tall. And as far as width goes, it's really going to depend on the battery and the stick out of the dust extraction port. So about 7 inches that way. Now you can see that we got some very nice, perfect plywood here. So typical, you know, box store plywood with some nice valleys in it. So we thought, what better way to show some sanding on here. And I wanted to touch base on something that I mentioned before we get started here. You can see we have a little skirt that goes around this pad right here, and that's going to help us with dust extraction. But what I want to do is I want to put some little marks that we can see. Okay, let's put us on a 60 grit pad here. We see all the little marks that I put around these pads, and we'll see when we turn this on, we see that rotating round and round. Now, what I can do, I can put enough pressure, to stop that from rotating. Now, it's still doing the orbit, but what it's doing is not rotating, and so what it's doing is not going to sand near as level as if it's actually random orbiting like it's supposed to. So make sure you can provide a little bit of pressure, but let the sander do the work. So make sure, and feel free, put a little mark on your pad so that you can see it, or several marks, and then you know that it's always rotating, so you can put a little pressure on it, but make sure that it's always rotating. And by the way, I just got dust everywhere because I did not have my bag on. So let's put our bag on first, and then we'll hook up an extractor after that. And by the way, we are getting some dust around the edge of this board, but not near as much that was flying around when we didn't have the bag on here. It's very balanced, very easy to drive. It's not trying to grab and go one way or the other. I'm getting the orbit going as well as the rotation going. And I'm just in speed 2. Let's go to turbo. You can see the rotations. I can slow them down by putting more pressure on it. And with that turbo mode, I'd say that's probably a little more than I would want in turbo mode. I'll probably go to speed 3. And that feels more like a pneumatic grinder or pneumatic sander to me, is in that mode 3. And I've got plenty of power, probably more power than most pneumatic sanders. But I don't have to worry about a compressor kicking on all the time. Let's take a look here. So yeah, I would say that's a decent job, a very good job of dust collection on an onboard, and there's way more in there stuck to the walls there. For a totally self-contained cordless sander, that's doing a great job, and the little bit of sanding I've done that it captured that much dust. So let's change out this pad or this disc, and we'll put on a 120. And we're also going to hook up a dust extractor, very common dust extractor, and as I mentioned, 1 1/4 inch, slides right in and holds into place. We're going to turn on our dust extractor and then run the sander again. Very little residual around this. Most of this was stuff we had already created anyway. So using the bag, and even better, the dust extractor is definitely, or vacuum is definitely the way to go. Okay, we've cleared out our dust, put a harder piece of wood up here, and we'll do some sanding on that with the dust extractor running. Very little residual, even when running the sander off the edge of the board, still getting very little residual on here. So doing a great job of picking up the majority of that dust through the pad there and into the vacuum. Okay, so after the sanding we've done, looks like we've lost 1 bar on the battery, so still quite a bit of sanding left, and that's the small 2.5 amp hour battery as well. We've done all the sanding with that smaller battery. Performance-wise, this thing has plenty of power, and I mean plenty. Like, turbo mode would be a very rare occasion when I would use that. I would probably stay in speeds 2 and 3 depending on what I'm doing. Now, maybe you get into some really rough wood, or maybe you're trying to knock down some Bondo and you've got some 36 grit paper on there. Maybe you want to go into that turbo mode. Also very impressed with the 2.5 amp hour battery and all the sanding we did, and we still had, you know, 3 bars left in the battery. I still think this 3.5 amp hour stacked lithium is the answer, kind of that medium, because I think the 5 amp hour is probably a bit too bulky on here. Just my opinion on that. Price on this is going to be $150 for the bare tool. I don't see a kit price on it yet, and I think you're probably going to spend another $100, $150 on a battery and charger depending on what you get, but be sure to look out for specials that are going on. Warranty on this is going to be a 5-year warranty like most of your Flex power tools. So 5-year warranty on the tool, and if you buy a battery and a charger, those are also covered with a 5-year warranty as well. We'll have a link in the description to this, although it's probably not going to hit the shelves for another month. I think like July 12th looks like the ship date on it. So be sure to keep track of us on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, and even TikTok. And if you don't mind, would you hit that like and subscribe button if you haven't done so already? And by all means, if you hated our video, well, then give us a thumbs down. But would you let us know in the comments why? Have a great day. Keep smiling.